Welcome to another Wednesday night with SONAR, the show that dives deep into the SONAR dashboard, the only freight transparency dashboard out on the market today. Little fumbling over my words. With me as always, Luke Falasca. How are you today, bud?
I am doing great. Glad to be back for another episode, my man.
Yeah.
We got some good stuff. We got some good stuff going on.
We've got a great show today.
It's been raining all day here in Chattanooga. My wife.
It's been a wet one. 100% chance of precipitation all day.
Yeah, my wife texted me a picture and said our front yard is underwater.
Fantastic. I'm excited to go home and see what my damage is as well.
Yeah. But oh well.
Exciting show tonight. We've got a very special guest on.
Oh yeah.
Lead economist Anthony Smith is going to be joining us a little later on, talking about some of the relative SONAR indices around macroeconomics and how they relate to freight. But before I have him join us and we talk about a few other things, I wanted to bring up something that I've noticed with you here lately, Luke. You've been kind of targeting a different type of customer that's kind of outside of the transportation realm. And I just wanted you to share a little bit about that. You've been targeting hedge funds a little bit more often lately. Why is that? Yeah,
hedge funds and just other financial institutions as a whole. I mean, banks and, it sort of just happened by accident when I first started here. I started talking to a handful of financial institutions, with majority of them being hedge funds. And what a lot of them are figuring out is that they're so glued to the transportation space and supply chains as a whole, because as we know, hedge funds' jobs are there to have their money that they manage make more money.
Certainly.
Right?
Yeah.
Their goal and job is to beat the market. If they don't beat the market, they are worthless.
So with the SONAR data being able to give you a pulse on things like the transportation industry as a whole, but just drilling down into retail, incoming freight coming into the markets, things like that, they're able to see some of their customers, grow as well, right?
Right, exactly. So you've got hedge funds that follow the transportation space quite heavily, a lot more than you might expect, that are looking at transportation companies. Obviously, they're looking at everybody's stocks and that kind of thing, because that's what they do. But they analyze markets and industries as a whole, too. Whether that's looking at retail sectors. I mean, remember, at the end of the day, every single product of any kind travels on a truck at some point. Right? Even 70% of all of the goods that are on trucks are on a ship at some point. So we have these massive, just supply chain data sets that we look at from our ocean data, our rail and intermodal data, our truckload data, and those are things that they're looking at. They're looking at the volume levels. They're looking to see, is the industry growing? Right? Is the industry contracting? Those are all things that we have. There's a lot of ways that we dive really, really deep and granular and can do specific things for each individual fund as they need those.
Sure.
But at a high level, they want to know when business is going good, when business is going bad, what that means for the economy. And Anthony's going to talk a lot about the economy later on and how some of our data sets correlate with that and are relatable. So. But for what they're doing, they want to know things very specific to their own portfolios, how transportation movements, how freight movements affect those, right? Whether they may not even be invested in transportation stocks, but transportation companies may affect their own holdings, like you mentioned, the retail sector, right?
Sure.
All those goods have to travel on trucks. So they want to keep a close eye on what's happening in those movements. So I started talking with them and it started working out.
That's fantastic. So how do some of these hedge fund managers reach out to you?
A lot of them they come through our system, they read some information of ours, they hear about some data sets, they're always looking for alternative data sources.
Yeah.
So most often they come through our funnel, they read an article, they sign up for a demo, which is great, that always works. And then, usually those get sent to me. So if you're a financial institution, you come through requesting access or to see SONAR, you're probably going to talk to me.
Fantastic. Or just reach out to you directly, Falasca at FreightWaves, right?
You can always email me.
Fantastic.
I'll always respond.
Well, that's great. I'm glad. I appreciate you diving into that a little bit more. I wanted to learn a little bit more about it. So before we bring out Anthony, though, what we got to talk about?
Mug of the week.
The mug of the week.
Which I got a little beef with you. That's not exactly. Does that really classify as a mug?
It absolutely classifies as a mug. My good friends at Taman Logistics.
You guys got to let us know in the comments if you think this is really a mug. I mean, it's nice. Don't get me wrong.
It's
it looks
incredibly
really
nice.
Cool. But is it a mug?
Dude, my friends at Taman Transport, another amazing brokerage based out of Chattanooga. They're actually growing their operation. Just opened a Dallas office. They're actually going to be at the Link 2020 down in Dallas.
Nice.
Big retail event. Speaking of retail, we're going to have some folks down there, I believe, as well. So that'll be a good time. But growing the operation there in Dallas, they're growing very, very quickly. And actually, CEO Chris Wang is actually going to be on with SONAR next week. So
I know, we're excited for it. That'll be really, really
Talking
good.
to another SONAR customer live on our show here with SONAR. So
love to see it.
But yeah, I just wanted to give a big shout out because this mug is absolutely amazing. Little Yeti action. Yeti did not pay me to say that, but Taman definitely hooked me up here. So very excited, and I really appreciate that. And so just a quick call to action: if you want to be the sponsor of the Mug of the Week, just shoot me an email, tigo@freightwaves.com. See Taman's logo here, and you can learn a little bit more about Taman Transport at tamantransport.com.
Right on.
All right, man. Let's talk econ.
Let's talk econ.
Let's bring out the man himself.
We can't talk about it.
We can't talk about it, but we got the
can.
guy. Let's bring out lead economist and market expert director, Anthony Smith. Anthony Smith.
Come on.
Hey, buddy.
Thanks.
Welcome to the show, man. Welcome.
Welcome to the show. Glad to have you here. Take my seat, please. You are here,
Welcome.
man. Welcome. Is this the first time on with SONAR?
First time guest.
On with SONAR.
Yeah.
Excellent.
You do a few other shows here, though. You have folks pulling you different directions to talk about your wealth of knowledge.
From time to time, I have a podcast with Zach Strickland, Freightonomics. That's always a blast. We don't always see eye to eye, but we have a good time. I like to jump in on FreightWaves now every once in a while, usually the host for that, and usually a monthly webinar of just going over the freight economy, and that's again with Zach again. So Zach and I go back and forth a lot.
That's awesome. So folks that have checked out your and Zach's podcast and read the Daily Watch, existing customers that read the Daily Watch, and just getting your kind of daily breakdown on the economy and how it affects the freight market, may already know a little bit about how it correlates. But for those out there that don't understand why we even have a lead economist on staff, tell us a little bit about your journey to FreightWaves and why kind of the correlations matter here.
Yeah. So my journey was, I guess, a strange one, like everyone else's here.
Everyone else here,
But my background's in economic advisory for C-suites. Usually help consult and advise them on different business cycle trends, on how to navigate those trends, what moves to make and when to make them, and what to expect in the marketplace, things like that. And
it's not a snake behind you, it's my HDMI cord. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. And throughout that, I really got a chance to take a step back, look at the industrial economy as a whole, look at the consumer side of the economy as a whole, and really kind of be able to dissect both. From there, move into housing construction more specifically. And my transition to FreightWaves is really focused around the housing construction aspect, and then now it's really kind of looking at the more macroeconomic field.
Okay, that's amazing. And so a lot of folks may not even realize that there is such a strong correlation between economics and freight movements. But even as Luke was just talking about it, everything is on a truck at one point. And some of these indices that we're tracking within SONAR help you to be able to track those more closely.
Definitely.
You sent me a page via our amazing feature to share pages within SONAR just a little while ago, kind of breaking down some of the things you've talked about recently in your Daily Watch write-ups and maybe even on some of your podcasts. But so the first one, and we can share our screen, I believe, now that I actually have an HDMI cord that came out of nowhere there. Looking at real goods, adjusted GDP, year over year for the U.S. So why is this important for us right now, and how can we kind of relate that to freight?
Sure. So we recently got the big GDP number. That's a quarterly release, and that's the number that everyone watches. That's the big headline number. But when we're looking at GDP, so the most recent number I think for the fourth quarter was up 2.1%, 2.3% for the year. When you're looking at GDP, a big part of that's going to be driven by goods and services. consumption of goods and services by the consumer.
Okay.
Services don't move freight. That has nothing to do with transportation. And so when you're looking at this robust growth or any kind of robust growth in the economy, the freight industry can be in a complete recession. So what we do is we strip out the services and all those other aspects that don't really have to do with transportation and just look at the goods portion overall. And so when we're looking at the goods adjusted GDP on a year-over-year basis, contrary to what we saw in the overall GDP, we saw there was a little bit of a dip down. And so that also kind of correlates to, I think, some of the things that we were hearing in the industry about some weakness in comparison to last year in the fourth quarter as well. So it's really important to look at and dissect the data in the correct way.
So what can someone as a carrier, and here we are, we're seeing the GDP year over year for the U.S. right here on SONAR. What can someone as a carrier, a large carrier, or even as a brokerage, why would they need to see this as it kind of updates? And being able to have it in a single pane of glass is great, but why is it important that we have it here?
Right, so if we were to zoom in on this, can we zoom in on that one at all?
Yeah, sure.
So, and
how close do you want me to get?
Out a little bit here. So if we look at that last dip, what year is that?
That's June 2016.
2016, not a good year for freight.
Sure.
Not a good year for freight. And then what happened in 2018? Robust growth.
Great year for freight, at least from the carrier perspective.
Yeah. And so what we see in reverse of that is for typical GDP, if we look at that did not correlate the same way. And so when we dissect it in this manner, we can really kind of see what GDP, the aspects of GDP are really impacting freight.
So let me ask this, and I could be completely off base. This is your realm, not mine. SONAR tracks freight movements, freight volumes from the U.S. every single day.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that the GDP is a quarterly report?
Yes.
So if I'm looking at the correlation here, if the freight market is flat, as it has been recently, I could almost predict what that quarterly GDP number is going to look like.
And so I know that we have one right next to it. Let's skip the second and go straight to the third, because that's a really good point.
So we're looking at reefer outbound tender rejections as it relates to the industrial production year over year change. And this is food, beverage, and tobacco, so things that would move in a reefer.
Right. And so when we're looking at industrial production, that's a monthly release. And so the government's really good about tracking things. They track things very well. Everything's accounted for. You, me, Luke, they track all of us, including indices as well. And so one of the biggest ones for the industrial sector is going to be industrial production. And they have many different breakouts for industrial production. They have manufactured good, non-manufactured good, durable goods, not durable goods, machinery, construction, and so it gets really granular, and so it's really great. Bad thing is that so the most recent data, we're in February now. The most recent data is through December.
Yeah, it looks like right at the end of the year there, it dies off.
And so it's great to be able to use these the indices that the government provides to help confirm there's some things. But when we're looking at, so we have the reefer outbound tender rejection index in there, that gives us an idea of what's going to happen ahead of time, what to expect. And so many of these large manufacturers of maybe food and beverage products might be using something like industrial production of non-manufactured goods or food, beverage, and tobacco products to really start to forecast off of. And so if you're forecasting from that December point, you're already a step behind. And so if you can forecast and have an expectation of where that trajectory is going to be by looking at what's actually moving on the ground right now, that's a powerful, some would say that's a magical pairing of the two.
Very magical. What kind of information does that give them to have that kind of step ahead? What can they gain from that?
Yeah, it allows them to pivot. So one of the things when I was in my advisory roles as an economist was being able to, when we put together these forecasts, is how to act in a marketplace. And because when you're in a certain business cycle, you want to be prepping and acting accordingly. And so if you're seeing a big downturn, but you're acting as if there's going to be a big upturn, you're off. And a lot of times what we're seeing in transportation, because it's so fragmented, And that's, I think, the big part of SONAR and FreightWaves is really bringing a lot of transparency.
Certainly.
Is that you're acting behind the curve. You're already behind the business cycle. So you're acting in a way that's already too late to really adjust and take advantage. And so being able to see these trends now really allows you to pivot and plan a lot more quickly and intelligibly before much of your competition, or really before you see it confirmed in some of these major releases.
Wow, that's incredible. Magical again.
So what we're
It's a
seeing
great
then
word.
is, since those reefer tender rejections are going down, we should be able to expect expect things to follow. Is that?
Yeah.
Right.
If I was a betting man, I would expect it to come down. Of course, there are anomalies every once in a while. It's not going to be a one-to-one, but I would expect this to come down in the most recent month. If you're looking at the year-over-year growth rate, not contract, not go into negative territory, but it's been a pretty strong correlation. We can probably zoom out on that a little bit, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And kind of see some of the movements here. It hasn't always been one-to-one, but the overall trend.
Directionally, for
And
sure.
yeah, directionally it's going to be the same.
Directionally, for
Obviously,
sure.
it's going to be different.
Our
for
data
first,
sets
so it's
update
measuring two
daily.
things,
These are updated monthly.
Monthly, and there's another thing. So again, I enjoy being able to make these comparisons and pairings between the government data sets and our data sets as well. But the thing is a little bit over a year ago, there was a government shutdown. And with that government shutdown, that also meant no more data.
Okay.
And so there was this big halt on data. And then after that, there's also revisions. And so there's these things that can happen with government data where you're expecting one index, you've been measuring it for so long at the same way, and then it goes through this revision, and that business cycle that was there once before is no longer there.
Okay.
And so that happens all the time. So being able to really see what's happening real time is that raw, pure look of what's going on in the marketplace.
Fantastic. Wow. It's really
So
amazing.
just something that a lot of people have asked me this too, and a lot of this was happening last year when, particularly in the beginning of 2019. 2019 was a bad year for freight in the sense to where there wasn't a lot of, just people just thought it was a lot worse than 2018, which it was in terms of rates. The word freight recession got thrown out a lot.
Thrown out. Yeah, all over the place.
All over the place.
Scaring people to death.
Before we even talk about whether there was a freight recession or not, can we just define what a recession actually is?
Yeah, I think that's a good part, is really saying, okay, take a step back, what is a recession? And so we're looking at the economy that's back-to-back quarters of contraction. And so if we're looking at GDP, that will be back-to-back quarters of contraction for the GDP, so something below zero. Okay. And so, for example, we can have a freight recession where we see contraction and volumes there, but we don't see anything in a typical GDP cyclical recession. And so there's definitely a disconnect there, and being able to really delineate the differences between the two are really key.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
So you've got a few other things in here. I know we skipped one. Do you want to go back there? Do you want to keep moving towards? We have about 7 minutes left.
No, we can keep moving.
I think a great one to touch on, because I've had the conversation, I know Luke's had the conversation with a lot of heavy haul carriers, a lot of flatbed carriers. They say, okay, I know you guys track a lot of reefer and van, but flatbeds, a little more old school. We don't send as much electronically tendered, freight movements. So how can we help these flatbed guys? And you've sent me something here, so help us understand this a little bit.
Definitely. So when I'm thinking about flatbed, a lot of times I'm thinking of what goes on flatbed, and traditionally it's manufactured goods, machinery, and construction.
Heavy stuff.
Yeah, heavy stuff.
Right.
And building materials, construction stuff. And so I believe we have here is this construction
So this is
spending.
total construction spending in green, and then laid over flatbed outbound tender rejections for the U.S.
Right. And so when we're looking at, I look at the two markets, and so what I can see is this is like, for example, in the green line, we can see that upward movement in construction spending for residential. And so quick backdrop, construction spending end of the year slightly below 2018.
Okay.
But there was a lot of momentum moving forward, so residential construction spending increased. And so that's going to be really the strong point. There's also a nice bump up in government spending, public spending as well for construction, mostly high-range streets. And so when we're looking at those building materials being moved, housing starts, that really ties into those flatbed trailers. The other aspect is, of course, looking at industrial segments that are going to really drive flatbed as well. So things like there's the ISM PMI that made a surprise jump this recently.
I have that here.
Yeah,
the Institute of Supply Chain Management, Supply Management Metrics, and the still looking at the industrial production year-over-year change.
Yeah, so we can see that. So typically with the ISM, it's a forward-looking indicator. Typically when we're looking at it compared to industrial production.
Okay.
The most recent month was a surprise jump up because it's been in contractionary mode for the last, I think, 5 months or so.
Yeah, let's zoom in here a little bit, and you can see that quick little spike after a long downturn.
Yeah, and so the big thing is like it's a nice change of pace, and so it's a survey that goes out. Zach Strickland hates when I talk about survey data because it's not tangible data. He wants the results, he wants real numbers, and so I like to pair it with actual real numbers. And so when we're looking at this compared to industrial production, we can see a pretty close correlation. However, this is where you don't just look at the numbers and you make the correlations, you also need someone to interpret these numbers for you.
Certainly.
And so I'm not anticipating that blue line, the ISM, to stay above that 50 mark. If it does, I want to be wrong about this because I want to see growth in the industrial economy. Sure. But I don't anticipate this taking hold until the second half of 2020. Okay. And so I don't expect there to be consistent over 50 growth for the ISM until maybe that March, April timeframe. But when I think we'll see that really, that turnaround in industrial production, I think we'll start to kind of see a turnaround for some flatbed carriers that are looking to haul things besides building materials and lumber, things like that.
Fantastic. So I wanted to feature each of our market experts at different times on the show, so thank you so much for joining. But part of having a SONAR subscription is having access to our market experts and breaking things like this down a little more granular so that you can understand them and how they affect your day-to-day operations. So if you're out there and you're saying, you know, I'm a heavy haul guy, I love what FreightWaves, I love what SONAR is doing, but I don't know that it's there, let's have a call. Luke and Anthony could jump on a call with you and just kind of break down this information so that it matters to you and be a little bit more tailored to your day-to-day operations.
Exactly. Really being able to hone in on your specific verticals and seeing what we can find in your underlying trends in your data set. So again, a magical pairing.
Yeah. Is there anything that we need to know about happening this week that's on your radar right now?
So far this week has been a pretty big one. We've had, again, construction spending. We just had the non-manufacturers PMI come out, so being able to dive into that's going to give us a bit of more of a look on the services side, and some of the non-manufactured goods, so again, food and produce, things like that. So that's going to be good for the reefers to dissect if you're hauling that kind of stuff. But really some trade deficit stuff also coming out that we're going to jump into, and that also has kind of implications for freight when you're seeing stuff coming in the country from the ports and gonna get hauled throughout the U.S. and stuff like that. So
awesome.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff.
So folks can see you almost every day on FreightWaves now.
Yes.
Unless you're out doing something else, gallivanting around town, whatever it is you do when you're not here.
Longboarding through the streets of Chattanooga.
Longboarding through the streets of Chattanooga. But tell us again where they can catch like yours and Zach's conversations and things like that. Yeah,
so of course on Freightonomics, our podcast, we go back and forth, have a good time there. FreightWaves Now, usually Monday through Friday. Every once in a while I get to sit down with Kevin Hill. Sometimes on What the Truck, sometimes on Road Dog Radio with Dooner himself. And of course, you can always reach me at asmith@freightwaves.com. Happy
just
to chat.
A Smith.
A Smith, just one.
Just one Smith, not just two Smiths, anything like that.
Just
Smith,
not the, just A Smith at FreightWaves.com.
The Anthony Smith.
All right, well, fantastic. Well, we're just right over a minute left here, so I want to wrap it up, guys. Anthony, thank you so much for giving your quick insights. But if you want to learn more, if you want to dive in to some of the macroeconomic data and how it relates to the freight markets, reach out to us, leave us a comment, scan the QR code down at the bottom, request a demo, learn a little bit more. If you're an existing customer and you want to learn more, lean on your resources on our customer success team. If you're new to FreightWaves, jump on a call with Luke or anyone else on our amazing account team, and we will be glad to show you more about Sonar. So thank you again to my friends at Taman Transport for my amazing mug of the week.
If you could
Luke?
also just let us know in the comments below if you think this classifies as a mug. While it is absolutely amazing and a very slick looking cup, is it a mug?
It's 100% a mug. I will go to the grave saying this is a mug. All right. So for everyone here at FreightWaves, again, I'm Tommy Igou. Thank you so much for joining with Sonar. We'll see you next Wednesday with our very special guest, Chris Wang from Taman Transport. Have a great evening.